All right. Well, hello, everybody. Hope that you guys are doing well. I wanted to put together a quick video to make sure that we're on the same page and that everybody knows what we're going to be doing as we get into this next semester. Obviously, trying to coordinate everybody's schedules this time of year is tough because the holidays are over and everybody's trying to get back to a normal schedule, and so figured we'll make it easy on everybody and just do a quick video, make sure that we all know what to do once this semester kicks off. I want to start out by saying, though, that super excited for this semester. I've really missed it. I've really missed our kids. I've really missed being able to connect with our leaders every single Wednesday. And beyond that, I'm also super happy about the way things went this past semester. Thought it was absolutely incredible. God really moved. God's continuing to work in our students. And I'm very eager to see what God continues to do in the lives of our students this coming semester. So again, this is just kind of a quick huddle. I'm a big believer that if something's not broken, then you shouldn't try and fix it. And I think the same applies to our ministry here. I believe that when God is working and when God is moving and when we're seeing growth in our students, we just need to get out of God's way. We need to get out of God's way and let God do what God's going to do. I want to start off by just reminding us of our mission. Our mission is to equip our youth by building them up in faith and equipping them with the knowledge, strength, and love of Christ, and sending them out to serve others with compassion and dedication, making a transformative impact both locally and globally. It's that last part that I really want to focus on, making a transformative impact locally and globally. I believe that Cross Youth doesn't have a separate mission from Cross Assembly Church. Cross Assembly is obviously a mission-sending base, and so Cross Youth needs to be a mission-sending base. And we're going to have some great opportunities for kids or for students to be able to reach their community, to be able to make an impact globally, and that's really what it's all about. Obviously, we're not just reaching students here in our church. These students are the next generation of pastors, missionaries, church leaders, families who are going to continue to make a local and a global impact. And so the investment that you guys are making in our students every single semester goes beyond the four walls of our church, but you guys really are making a global impact when you're serving our students. Moving on, I wanted to quickly celebrate some of the things that God has done since the start of last year. I just wrote down a couple of things that came to mind. One, we had a great community outreach project. If you remember back in December, our kids baked over 600 cookies, which were distributed to over 200 households in our community, and that was an opportunity to invite people who might not have a church home to come and visit Cross Assembly and to make our church their home. And we actually did have multiple people who were able to engage, who our church was able to engage with, and who got connected with our church because of that project, which was really awesome. I really think that that's just the start, obviously, of what God wants to do in 2026. So we're going to continue to reach our community. Youth camp and youth conference this past summer and this past fall was really incredible. You can see there that we had 14 students give their lives to Christ at youth camp. That was across all of our campuses, but we had a lot of kids from North who went to youth camp and youth convention, and so that was a really incredible time. In addition to that, we had several kids who felt or sensed a call of God on their lives, and that happened at youth camp, and so that's really awesome. Obviously, you can see that our weekly attendance has grown. I don't believe that everything is about numbers, right? I believe that when we get to heaven, the Lord isn't going to ask you or I how many youth we reach, but what kind of youth we discipled. But at the same time, if you throw out sheep food, sheep are going to come, right? And so I think the fact that we have seen very steady growth since the start of last year is a testament to the fact that you guys are working hard and being faithful to shepherd and to disciple these young people that God has brought to us. So continue to do that this semester. Live worship is another big addition that has started since last year. Emily has done an incredible job with worship. One of the things that I love seeing with our students is they're very engaged in worship. But at the same time, I don't get the sense that when students are raising their hands or kneeling at the altar during worship, I don't get the sense that it's performative or anything like that. There's a real sincerity to worship that our students have, and I really love that. And I want us to continue to see that happen this next semester. And then finally, I've just received a lot of personal stories from students and honestly parents as well, who've talked about the impact that this ministry has had on their students. And I'm sure that you guys can also share stories, whether it's things that you're hearing in small groups or things that you're hearing from students, throughout the week. God's really working in the lives of our students. He's doing something really incredible. Not to get into too much detail, but I've talked to several young guys who have sensed a call to full-time ministry on their lives. And it's crazy because it's like this is the next generation of pastors, not just here at this church, but at churches, here and around the world. Some young people are being called to full-time missions, which is absolutely incredible. So just wanted to quickly point out a couple of those things, really celebrate what God has done. And I hope that this encourages you guys to show you that the work that you are doing, the dedication that you have put into this ministry, it's really paying off. It's really paying off. So please keep it up. I also wanted to look ahead at what this coming semester and this coming year holds. Again, this is just a couple things. I really want us to be more involved in local and global evangelism. We're going to have some more local outreach projects like the cookie baking project that we did. We're going to do some more things like that. We're actually going to have some evangelism training for our kids this coming year, so more information about that to come. We're going to have more giving projects like Project Rescue. Project Rescue is an incredible giving project, and we're going to have some more opportunities for kids to give. And then we're also going to have some short-term missions trips for kids who might be interested in full-time missions to go on a trip and to serve. Like I said, missions and evangelism is at the very heart of our church. So I think that missions and evangelism needs to be at the very heart of our youth and of our students. Along with that, we're going to have more serving opportunities for our kids. In the past, we've not really allowed students to serve in youth, and we're going to start to see that change. I want kids to know how to serve one another. I want them to get good ministry experience. If there's a young person who maybe feels some kind of call to ministry, I don't want them to have to wait until, they're like college age to get experience serving. I want this to be a really great place for kids to get practice with, serving in the church and serving one another. We're going to have some fellowship opportunities outside of our youth nights. And I'd love to get some of y'all's ideas on that. Whether it's taking the kids like bowling or roller skating or whatever. I really want to be able to get the kids outside of church, be able to fellowship with them during the week. And then the last thing you see there is an expanded teaching team. This kind of goes along with what I was talking about a moment ago. We have some young people who are called to ministry, and I want to do some simple things like even giving the kids an opportunity to share like a 5-minute devotional or something like that before small groups, or even if there's a young person who maybe has shown a gift for teaching, letting them teach on a Wednesday night. That's something that I'm passionate about, something I'm really praying through. And so if you actually know a young person who you believe has a gift for teaching, please approach me and mention that name. I would ask that you not approach the student, and say, hey, you're pretty smart, come teach on a Wednesday night. Talk to me first, and then we can approach that student and help disciple them and develop them to teach. Again, it's not an exhaustive list here, but those are just a couple of the things I really believe very strongly that the Lord has placed on my heart for this semester, and we're going to see that happen in 2026. Okay, so we're going to now briefly talk about safety and accountability. This is extremely important. Obviously, if you have served in youth before, you've heard me talk about this. So this shouldn't be new to you, but this is so important that I want to make sure that we are all on the same page before we go into this semester. You can see this very first note here is to refer to the Cross Youth Leader Handbook if you have any questions or you need more information. Of course, you can also reach out to me directly if you have any questions. If you want a hard copy of that handbook, I can give it to you, but I will send a PDF of our Cross Youth Handbook that you can refer to as well. The guarantee that I need to be able to make to the parents of all of the students who are back here is that their child will never be placed in an uncomfortable or a compromising or an inappropriate position. Okay, that's a guarantee that I need to be able to make to every leader. That's also the guarantee that I need to be able to make to all of our leaders. Okay, that's the guarantee I want to make to all of our parents. It's also the guarantee I need to be able to make to all of our leaders, that you will not be placed in an uncomfortable or a compromising or an inappropriate or a questionable situation. So everything that you see here isn't just for the safety of our students. Everything that you see here is also for the safety of our leaders. And if we are all very, very diligent to keep everything that's listed on here, and if we all work together to ensure that we are holding one another accountable, then we can make sure that no leader and no student is placed in an uncomfortable or an inappropriate or an unsafe situation. First thing you see here is to never be alone with a child. A lot of times you will hear people talk about the most important rule of kids ministry, the most important rule of youth ministry. It's this: to never be alone with a child. And that's without exception. So everything that you see here isn't just a suggestion. It's not just a guideline or a good idea. Everything that we see here is something that we all have to abide by at all times without exception. I have the phrase written down, observable spaces. Basically what this means is that whenever we interact with, whenever we minister to, whenever we engage with a student at any time, we need to do so in a space that is readily and easily observable by another leader at all times. The next thing you see is to never have an interaction with a student that could be interpreted as inappropriate. Great example of this would be like physical contact with a student. A lot of times I'll have leaders ask me if they can hug students. And of course you can. Of course you can hug students. But if it's a student of the opposite sex, especially, for any student, but especially students of the opposite sex, hugs should be limited to like a quick side hug. Okay, don't like wrap your arms around a student and tuck their head in your shoulder and spin them around, whatever, because you love them so much. Like, maybe that's just how you give hugs. That's not what we need to do back here, because of course that could very easily be interpreted as inappropriate, but a side hug isn't. I don't know if you have ever met males before, but you understand that males like to talk about and joke about things that are inappropriate. Another way that we apply this principle is that we don't engage in any speech or joking or language that is inappropriate, okay? In fact, if you hear a student talk about or joke about things that are off color or coarse or inappropriate, we need to address that quickly and shut down those kinds of conversations. And we definitely don't need to engage with that. We definitely don't need to join them in talking about or joking about things that are inappropriate. Okay, so I know this one seems a little bit open-ended, but basically what this means is always have in your head, be thinking about like, is there any way to interpret what I'm saying or doing as less than appropriate? And if the answer is yes, then we need to seriously reconsider whatever it is that we are saying or doing. The next thing we see is to never text, DM, Snap, that's like communicate on Snapchat with a student directly. This is where that accountability piece comes in. Again, it's not because I think that any leader is that I think that we need to distrust any leader or anything like that, right? I trust every single leader here in youth with my life, okay? And I honestly mean that. I completely have full confidence and trust in all of our leaders. But as you know, kids are unpredictable. Kids can say and send stupid things over text that are inappropriate. And if we're texting a student one-on-one and all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, they take the conversation in an inappropriate or explicit direction, that's obviously very bad. That's not something that we want. But that's also something that could be very easily avoidable if we would just make sure that we aren't having direct electronic communication with students. So this means that if a student texts you and asks you a Bible question, man, that's great. Just put either me or another leader in the group chat with you for accountability. I have students that follow me on Instagram, and they'll send me like funny videos or reels about the Bible or something like that on Instagram. And if I'm being honest, I don't even open them. Okay, if a student messages me on Instagram, I will not open it. Okay, and the reason why is because I need to make sure that I can guarantee you guys and all of our leaders and all of our parents that I have never had any kind of electronic communication with a student that was not observed by another leader or another adult. Okay. I know that this might sometimes kind of make for some awkward conversation, right? I've had to explain to students why it is that I didn't open their message on Instagram, or I've had to explain to students why it is that I had to throw another leader in the group chat when they texted me. And sure, it kind of seems a little bit awkward. Sure, it might seem a little bit excessive at times, but the stakes are just too high, right? The stakes are way too high for us to risk something like that. So never have any electronic communication directly with a student. Put me or another leader or a parent or something like that in the group chat if a student messages you. And then, of course, the last thing that we see here is to immediately report to a pastor. It can be me or Pastor Joe or, any of the pastors who are on duty here. Immediately report any suspicion or evidence or a report of abuse, neglect, illegal activity, suicidal ideation, or self-harm. This is extremely serious. Even if it's something as minor as like a kid tells you that, hey, I used a fake ID to buy beer, or I bought, a pack of cigarettes just to see what it was like to smoke a cigarette, and I shouldn't have, right? A lot of times it's easy for us to look at that and be like, okay, well, you shouldn't do that, but, a lot of kids have done that. It's not a big deal. Well, the thing about it is a lot of times if a student has had something very serious happen to them, or they've done something very serious that they are afraid to talk about or they don't want to confess to, a lot of times what they will do is they will confess to maybe something that they see as less serious in the hopes that the conversation will lead to them being able to confess a more serious issue. So basically what that means is that if a kid tells you, hey, I smoked a cigarette and I shouldn't have, a lot of times it's more than just a cigarette. Okay, a lot of times they're actually trying to tell you that something more serious is going on, but they feel like they can't talk about that, so they're going to maybe bring up something that's less serious, and that's their way of trying to steer the conversation towards a heavier subject. In other words, a lot of times it's more than just a beer. It's more than just a cigarette. It's more than just a vape pen. Oftentimes that's evidence that something deeper is going on that a student feels like they can't talk about. So report that to either me or Pastor Joe. Obviously, if you have reasonable suspicion that a student has been abused, that can be, bruises or wounds that aren't easily explainable by kids being kids or, sports or something like that. Report that to me or Pastor Joe, and you're not getting anybody in trouble. If a kid has a bruise in their arm, we're not going to go scorched earth and like beat up the parents and drag them out, in front of the church and beat them up or something like that, right? We're just going to look into something, make sure everything's okay. You're not getting anybody in trouble if you tell me or Pastor Joe or another leader that you have reason to believe that something, less than appropriate is going on. Okay, I want to make that very clear. If you see something, say something. Okay, you aren't automatically getting somebody in trouble. You aren't gossiping. You aren't slandering. But if you have any reason to suspect that a child or a student has been abused or neglected, please tell me or Pastor Joe immediately. And then with that neglect piece, that can obviously be if a student is like malnourished or something like that, or they have some kind of a medical condition, some kind of medical issue going on that isn't being tended to, right? They have a wound on them or something like that that's festering and hasn't been tended to. Obviously, that counts as neglect. So tell either Pastor Joe or myself about that. Illegal activity, if a student tells you that they have been abused, report that immediately. If a student tells you that they have committed some kind of crime, please report that immediately, again, to either myself or Pastor Joe. And by the way, if a student comes to you and says, hey, I have been, sexually abused or something like that, or hey, my parent or my guardian is physically abusing me, again, tell me, and just so you know, I'm going to immediately contact the authorities, right? We have to as a church, but also that's not just because we have to. That's because we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to make sure that we are doing everything to tend to the physical and emotional well-being of our children. And so if a child confesses or confides in you that they have been abused, that they are suffering neglect, or that something illegal has happened to them, report that immediately, and I will contact the authorities. And then the same goes for like suicidal ideation and self-harm. If a student says, hey, I'm planning to commit suicide, we have to report that as well. Again, that's not just because the law requires us to. That's because we have, I believe, a mandate from the Bible itself to make sure that we are doing everything to protect children. And I take that very seriously. Okay, so just to reiterate, if a child says that they have been the victim or that they have perpetrated some kind of crime, if you have reasonable suspicion that a child has been physically abused, sexually abused, or is being neglected, then report that. And again, you aren't automatically getting somebody in trouble, right? It will be handled, the correct way. And then if a student says that they are contemplating suicide, or if you see evidence of self-harm, please report that as well. And again, just to reiterate, if a child comes to you and says, I've been abused or I've had this serious crime committed against me, tell me, and my next phone call will be the police. Okay, I just make that very, very clear because that's how seriously we have to take any kind of accusation of any kind of crime committed against a child. Okay. Okay, now let's talk about discipleship. Discipleship is going to be really, really important as our team grows. This is really going to be the key to our growth as a serve team. And discipleship is going to be the difference between us just showing up and doing a task on a Wednesday night or on a Sunday morning, and us actually being very intentional about maximizing the amount of impact that we can have, and being very intentional about mobilizing other people so that they can go and make disciples and disciple and develop others so that they can go and disciple and develop others. And this is important because what follows is exponential growth. If every single one of us is intentional about discipling and developing somebody next to us, and then teaching that person how to teach others to disciple and develop others, then we're going to see really unprecedented amount of growth in our ministry. And so I want to make sure that we understand this because, again, this is going to be really key for helping make room for growth on our team. So you've probably heard this term used before. You can see that top slide. DCLA stands for Director, Coach, Leader, and Apprentice. And this is sort of the language that we speak when we talk about discipleship at our church. So the most important thing to understand with this is that this is it's not a ranking system. Okay, it's not like, if you were to put this in military terms, like director is like a general, coach is like a, maybe a captain, L is like a sergeant, and then A is like, he's just the private and whatever. We ignore him, right? That's not how it works, okay? That's not what it looks like. Instead, this is really just the language that we speak when we define our roles as both serve team members and then also disciples. Okay, again, not a series of rankings. It's not like the higher you go up in the model, the more important you are, or something like that. This is just making sure that we all understand what our specific assignment is, and for the purposes of what we're doing today, if you are watching this, you are now a leader. And again, I'm just going to define what a leader does here in a moment. But I think a great picture of why this model is important, you can actually find it in 1 Corinthians 12, 17 through 20. Paul says this. He says that if the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? Or if the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God has arranged the members in the body, each one of them, as he chose. For if all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. So to maybe use Paul's language here, DCLA, again, not a series of rankings, it's a way to make sure that not everybody is operating as an eye. Or it's a way to make sure that not everybody is operating as an ear, or that not everybody is operating as a nose. Instead, DCLA helps us understand what an ear is supposed to do and what an eye is supposed to do and what a nose is supposed to do, so that we're all not doing the same thing. And again, Paul even makes the point, he says that the eye can't say to the foot that I have no use for you. Again, we're all parts of the same body. One of us doesn't have a more important role than the other, but we all have a diverse set of roles that we have to operate in. And so again, if you're watching this, you are now a leader. Okay, you're going to get a name badge at the start of this semester that has your name, and it's going to say Youth Leader at the bottom. Pat yourself on the back. Go buy yourself some ice cream later, because you deserve it. You're now a leader. Now, basically what this means, again, I'm going to define what a leader is. This means that really you have two new roles. The first and most important one is you need to be intentional about trying to find and develop an apprentice to serve alongside you. Okay, the job of an apprentice is really just to learn the mission of our ministry. The job of an apprentice is really just to be developed and to watch how ministry is done in our specific ministry. And it's going to be your job to find and develop an apprentice. Now, it's not a situation where it's like, I'm going to be coming up to people and it's like, hey, you've been a leader for 4 months and you haven't found anybody that you've recruited to serve on youth. What's going on? It's not going to be like that. All right. It's not any kind of a high pressure thing. This is just something that I want to encourage people to do. It can be somebody who attends our church or doesn't attend our church, who's part of your family and you think that they would be a good fit on the team. Or it can be somebody, in your small group who you feel like would be a great fit on the team. But this is just something that I'm going to emphasize among our leaders is find somebody in your circle, somebody who's part of our church, who you think would be a good fit on our team, and then invite them to come and be a part of what we're doing in youth. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is simply this, that you might be assigned an apprentice or somebody who's new to our serve team to develop over the course of the semester. So when people start serving in youth, they're going to be an apprentice for 1 semester. Again, they're just going to have a semester to learn our mission, learn our values, learn how things work on Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings. And you might be assigned an apprentice to develop. And it's not really hard, right? All this means is that you're just taking that person by the hand and saying, come with me and watch what I'm doing as I am serving in youth. Again, it's not hard. You don't have to come up with some kind of a curriculum or something like that for what to teach your apprentices now. It's not anything like that. Basically, all this means is that you're just going to be assigned somebody who you're going to partner with in ministry in youth. And that person is going to observe what you're doing. That person is going to learn the mission alongside you. And then if there's any specific wisdom that you have, then you're going to be able to share that with that person as they're learning, the ministry. So great example. Let's say that you're serving in let's say that you're serving like in small groups or something like that. You're a group leader. Well, maybe what this means is that you're going to kick off the small group, and then you're going to give your apprentice the task of, hey, do you want to lead this next question? And they're going to take the next question that you have in groups and ask the necessary follow-up questions or whatever. Or if you're serving in guest services, maybe this means that if you're standing by the welcome desk greeting students as they come, you're just going to simply tell the apprentice who you've been assigned, hey, we just got to be really excited. We got to be, super, super happy that all of the kids are here. We've got to just really be intentional about welcoming them. And they're just going to be doing ministry alongside you on Wednesday nights. It's super, super simple, but it's actually really effective. And one of the things that this is going to do is it's going to help people who are new to our ministry not feel stranded. Okay, they're going to have a guide. They're going to have a leader with them who is able to actually show them what serving in youth really looks like, and so there's not going to be this sense of like, oh man, I signed up to serve and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing and that sort of thing. We're not going to have that because, again, for a whole semester, an apprentice is just going to be paired up with a leader. Again, this is going to be one of you guys, just to shadow you and to do ministry alongside you. And it might sound complicated. It's really not. Again, it's just you're going to have somebody assigned to you who's going to serve alongside you for a semester. And then after that semester, they're going to have somebody assigned to them. So congratulations, leaders. Lead, you guys are good at doing that. Y'all are leaders. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. All right, now let's talk about groups. You can see that our goal for our groups is to guide fruitful conversation in a small group setting. That's the why. That's our goal for groups. And then the how is that, one, you're going to use the questions as a guide to facilitate thought-provoking and encouraging discussion. And then two, you're going to shepherd the conversation. Keep the conversations on topic, try and minimize distractions, and then make sure that kids understand that this is a place where they can be honest, and where they aren't going to be judged for asking questions. And then you also want to ask good follow-up questions. So we'll dive into this a little bit. Again, you're going to use, you can see in that very first point, we're going to use the guide that I give, or the questions that I give or whoever's teaching give, just as a guide. That's just a starting point for the conversation that we're having. So, typically I'll give 3 or 4 small group discussion questions. If you're having really good, really fruitful conversation from that first question, don't feel like you have to cut the conversation short because, you have to get through all of the questions that are in the small group leader guide. These questions aren't divinely inspired or anything like that, right? It's just a guide. It's just a starting point. And so allow the Holy Spirit to be the one who guides the conversation from there. And then you also want to shepherd the conversation. So keep it on topic. So if we're talking about love, make sure that, if a kid wants to talk about, whether or not Bigfoot is in the Bible or something like that. All right, well, maybe that's a great question. That's just another question for another day, right? That's not what we're trying to do in our small groups. Keeping the questions on topic as much as possible. Minimizing distractions. So if one kid is pouring his heart out and then another kid is just being a complete goofball, we want to try and minimize those distractions. And then this other one is important to ensure that the conversation is honest and judgment-free. This is important because we have some students, obviously students have a lot of struggles. Students have doubts about their faith. And then we have some students who are either maybe not believers, or they're new to the faith, or they've never been part of a church before. And they might ask questions or say things that they might ask a question about the Bible that maybe somebody, half their age who's been going to church all his life should know, right? Well, did Noah build the ark? Or, what's John 3:16 say, or whatever? And it's easy for other students to have kind of a reaction of like, well, how could you not know that, whatever. And we want to minimize that. Okay, we want this to be a place where a kid can ask honest questions and get honest answers, and not feel bad if there's something that they don't know, or not feel bad about asking a question to an answer that they already should know, right? And then the other part of that is, like I said, kids have struggles, kids have doubts, and we want our small group setting to be a safe place where kids can talk about that without feeling like, we're trying to beat them up or something. So, for example, if a kid comes in and says that, I'm not sure if I actually believe the Bible, right? I don't want our reaction to be, how dare you say that, and never come around here talking about that stuff again. And, you should feel bad for having questions about your faith. That doesn't need to be our response, right? Because if a kid feels judged for expressing some kind of a doubt like that, they're going to go from struggling honestly to struggling privately and not letting anybody in, and that's a really bad thing, right? We want our small groups to be a place where kids are respected, where they feel like they can ask real questions, where they can talk about real subjects, and not be judged for it. Okay, and that's not just for our leaders; that's for our students as well. Again, kids pick up on the fact that other kids roll their eyes when they ask a question, or kids pick up on the fact that other kids, judge them for asking a question. And we want to minimize that in our small groups. Obviously, this is all within reason. So if a kid comes and says that he wants to murder somebody, our response isn't, oh, well, I'm not judging you for that, and thank you for saying that, right? We have a different response to those kinds of things. There are some topics that are off topic, and again, use your judgment for those. So if a kid comes and he starts talking about, really, for example, graphic, sexual issues, those are conversations that leaders need to have individually with students, obviously with other leaders present, but those aren't the kinds of things that need to be talked about in small group settings. If there's if a student is sharing maybe confidential information, and I've had that before. I was leading a small group one time, this was several years ago, where a student started talking about some major issues that were going on in his family that I'm sure his parents didn't want shared. I've had students share some medical information that about family members that the family was really trying to keep confidential. And we need to be sensitive to that, and be careful to make sure that what is shared in a small group setting doesn't cross any kind of a line. Again, that would be really graphic sexual content. That would be confidential information. And then if a student is talking about committing some kind of a crime, or something like that. We've got a bunch of middle schoolers, and this kid's talking about how he used a gun to go and rob a 7-Eleven, right? Well, obviously that's not something that we want to talk about in a small group setting. And then, of course, according to the previous slide that we had, we want to handle those situations accordingly. And then, you can see that I put the term judgment free and a little question mark beside it. I put that because that term can kind of sound like, sort of one of these yuppie terms that people like to use of like, we don't judge anybody, so we just, affirm everybody's sin or whatever. And that's not what we're talking about. Again, basically what this means is that, we want kids to feel like they can ask honest questions and get honest answers, and not feel like a leader or other students are looking down on them or think poorly of them or are mad at them for having questions about their faith or something like that. And then you can see this last thing, that even though these are the primary responsibilities that group leaders have, you're going to be asked to assist in other areas as well. So maybe you're a group leader, but I want you to do transition on a Wednesday night. I don't want you to say, well, I would help do announcements, but, I'm leading a small group and so I can't do that, right? Obviously, if you feel like you're getting overbooked or stretched thin, that's one thing. But, you might be asked to assist in other areas as well. This is just sort of the primary responsibility that we as group leaders are going to have during the semester. Okay, so one more thing, and then I'm going to let you guys get home for dinner. Action items. Again, this is, our very first Wednesday night is February 4th. It's coming up really quickly. This is what are we going to do between now and February 4th? Well, first of all, look out for a scheduling request, and please answer your scheduling request in services. And it's going to say, you've been placed on the schedule for Connect Team or for a welcome desk or whatever. And then the other part is just pray that God will send you one person to disciple and to develop over the course of this semester. And then most importantly, please join me in praying for the students. I really, really have very high expectations for what God is going to do this semester. I really do. I think that this is going to be a semester that our kids remember for a really long time. I think it's going to be a semester that our leaders remember for a really, really long time as well. But it has to start with prayer. I heard somebody say this, and this is so true, that there's never been a single revival in history that wasn't preceded by prayer. Yeah, that's 100% true. Honestly, on a Sunday morning, before or after service, I would encourage you guys to go into the youth room and pray over chairs, pray over the building, pray over the doors as kids are walking in. Like, just cover this ministry and cover these students in prayer. That's the absolute most important thing that we can do. And we can strategize all we want. We can talk about DCLA, and we can talk about all these things. But really, if we're not covering this ministry in prayer, whatever we do is going to be absolutely fruitless. So please pray with me.